Okay, now let's look at some practice questions. So the first one we actually went over in the previous video, but let's do it again. So the number of valence electrons in sodium. Well, how do we determine that? Sodium is in group 1, and all the atoms in group 1 have one valence electron. So we can just write 1. Okay? Number of protons. How many protons does lithium have? Oh, we're talking about sodium, excuse me. How many protons does sodium have? Well, there's this 11 in the upper left-hand corner. That's the number of protons. So sodium has 11 protons. So will sodium gain or lose electrons? That E minus means electrons. And how many? So like I said, sodium is a alkali metal. And when you hear metal, I want you to think lose electrons. So sodium is going to lose electrons. Sodium has one valence electron. Okay? It's in group 1. It's going to give up 1 to become just like neon. And I'll write out neon again. It's a good idea to practice seeing. That's probably too light, huh? Let's make it purpley. So it wants to look like neon. Okay? And neon has a full octet, 8 valence electrons. Okay, so when you hear full octet, you need to think valence electrons equal 8. Okay? So neon, full octet. All right. Now, sodium. Sodium has one valence electron. Sodium will lose 1, and put E minus, lose 1 electron. Okay? So if you lose 1 electron, initially, how many does it have? It has 11, because the number of protons are going to be equal to the number of electrons. So if it loses 1, now it's going to have 11 minus 1, 10 E minus. E minus just means electrons. So what's the charge? 11 E pluses minus 10 E minuses, right? And then you get plus 1. Okay, so the charge should be plus 1. Need to do some, I probably can't do it here, but yeah, there you go. So 11 minus 10, and you get a positive 1. So which ion, so now we made an ion, okay? And you actually made, I didn't say this earlier, but it's important I say it now. Remember our 2 different ions? So there are cations and anions. What you made is a cation because it's positively charged. Okay, so cations are positively charged. Sodium is positively charged, all right? It became a plus 1 ion. And this ion now resembles which noble gas? It's neon and E. All right, now let's do bromine. Bromine is all the way down here. Bromine has, well, let's start here, number of protons. That's easy to do. That's the atomic number, which is 35, not the mass. The mass is the protons plus the neutrons, okay? Neutrons have no charge, and so we're not really going to consider them right now, even though they are important. We're going to focus on the electrons and the protons. So what's the number of valence electrons in bromine? Bromine is in group 7A, okay? Bromine has 7 valence electrons. All right, so what's the closest noble gas to bromine? Well, argon is all the way over here, but you have to go through all these elements to get there. Krypton is just right here. All right, so it can just gain 1 electron to become like krypton. So if it goes 1 more over, it's going to gain 1 electron. So it's going to gain 1 E minus. put gain 1 E minus. There we go. Okay, and if you have, how many electrons do you have after gaining? Well, this actually should be number of valence. No, that's right. Number of electrons after gaining or losing. So it's going to gain 1, right? So if you have 35 protons and you're neutral, then you have 35 electrons. But if you gain 1 electrons, now you just add 1 more, you have 36 E minuses. Okay? Now what's the charge? 35 P pluses for protons, subtracted from 36 E minuses, and you get a charge of -1, or just a negative charge. Okay? Now what this ion represents which noble gas? Well, it looks just like krypton, Kr. Because krypton also has 36 electrons. Okay? Now what about magnesium? Magnesium is right here in group 2. Magnesium has how many valence electrons? 2 valence electrons because it's in group 2. How many protons? 12, because that's the atomic number. Will it lose or gain electrons, and how many? Well, it's a metal. Magnesium is a metal, and we'll see everything, a lot of the stuff from zinc all the way over to the left of the periodic table is going to lose electrons, okay? So like, remember when I said if you hear metal, hear something as a metal, it's probably going to lose electrons. So how many? It has 2 valence electrons to lose, so it's going to lose those 2 electrons. Okay? So if it's going to lose 2, and it starts with 12, 12 minus 2 is 10 E minuses left over. Okay, and what's the charge? Well, if you start with 12 P pluses, that's the protons, subtract that from 10 E minuses, and what's left over? Oh, I put 13. Excuse me, 12. Okay, and you get A plus 2. Okay, so what does this look like? Which noble gas has 10 electrons? That's neon. Neon has 10 electrons, so it's going to look just like neon. So see how sodium and magnesium, when they're in their ionic forms, when they're ions, when they're charged atoms, they have the same electron configuration as neon. All right, what about nitrogen? Nitrogen is in group 7. Or no, it's in group 5, excuse me. It has 7, or no, it doesn't have 7 electrons, it has 5. But it does have 7 protons. That's where I'm getting my 7 from. Okay? So nitrogen is in group 5, has 5 valence electrons, has 7 protons, and this is where it gets tricky. Is it going to lose or gain electrons, and how many? So what's the closest noble gas to neon? I go over 1, 2, 3, and I'm saying, what's the closest noble gas to nitrogen? I go over 1, 2, 3, and get to neon. I go over 1, go to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and get to helium. It's closer, neon is actually closer. So it's going to want to look like neon. So if it has 5 valence electrons, and it wants to have a full octet to look like neon here, it's going to gain 3 E minuses. Again, the E minuses represent the electrons. So 5, and you add 3 more electrons, you have a total of 10 E minuses. Okay, now what does this look like from mathematically? Well, how many protons do you have? You have 7 protons, right? And you're gaining, you have 10 E minuses, 10 electrons, 7 minus 10, and then you get a -3. All right, so again, which one does that look like? That looks like neon. Neon has 10 electrons, so Ne. So notice how a lot of the time we want to have the same number of electrons as a noble gas. Okay, so it's always going to a atom in its ionic state is going to want to look like a noble gas because noble gases are stable, and that's the goal of these atoms is to follow the octet rule. Okay, so we want to follow these atoms want to follow the octet rule. So we want to gain, lose, or share electrons to have 8 in their outer shell to become stable, right? So here is our practice problems again. And you can see 3 out of the 4 actually want to look like neon.